Well, President Putin is making a lot of news today, first admitting that Ukraine is really no longer a country, but essentially a terrorist organization. And of course, they have a president who's no longer elected, so who's an authoritarian, not elected by the people, and just staying in power. He asked the question, how exactly can you negotiate with terrorists? And why should we give them a break in the action of battle right now so that they can just rearm themselves, get like Western weapons from NATO, and then carry out other terrorist attacks on our infrastructure across our country? Why would we do that? He asked that question. Watch.
На высшем уровне. Но как же проводить в этих условиях подобные встречи? О чем говорить? Кто вообще ведет переговоры с теми, кто делает ставку на террор, с террористами? И за что их поощрять, предоставляя передышку в боевых действиях, которая будет использована для накачки режима западным оружием, для продолжения насильственной мобилизации и подготовки других террористических актов, подобных тем, которые были осуществлены в Брянской и Курской областях.
Of course, he's talking about the Bryansk bridge attack, which was confirmed today by the Russian intelligence. And then here, of course, you see the Crimean bridge attack as well, which was carried out by the SBU, all with NATO's help. So President Putin just spoke with President Trump on the phone. That conversation went very interestingly. Let's bring in Colonel Rob Maness, the host of the Rob Maness Show, to talk about that, plus NATO and so much more today. And where do things stand right now? It seems like things are spiraling out of control. We had Tara Reid on the show yesterday from Moscow, and she was saying, well, you know, she was living in Moscow. She's saying, I was feeling hopeful in the spring that we were about to maybe achieve some sort of a peace agreement. Putin just telling President Trump, I'm going to attack Ukraine. I'm going to retaliate. And President Trump was like, yeah, I think you need
Can't blame you.
I think you need to do that. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I've done several hits on this, Clayton and Natalie, and I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. Look, it's extremely important that the pro-war people on the Western side of this, the Ukraine side of this, understand that the Ukrainians just attacked a leg of the triad, the nuclear triad of the world's largest nuclear force country. And the United States is the second largest. And you should expect that the leadership of that country is going to respond in a way that will make it clear that you don't mess with our nuclear forces. And yes, I understand that the Ukrainians have a right to attack those bombers because they're used to fire conventional missiles into targets in the war that they're in with Russia. But this is the difference, and why I've been talking about this since before Putin even went in 2022, and the concerns about that. And I've been attacked for being a coward, for being a nervous ninny. Putin, you know, the other side says Putin's just saber rattling. He doesn't really do anything. But look, guys, he published a new nuclear doctrine last year that had a piece in it that said essentially that if a non-nuclear weapons power attacks us and they're supported by nuclear powers, and they attack part of our nuclear forces infrastructure or our nuclear forces themselves, that puts us into the realm of using nuclear weapons in this new doctrine. So look, I mean, I'm simplifying it, but that's essentially what this attack has done. And make no bones about it, the Ukraine's bumper sticker is on this, but this is a NATO, United States attack. And what really surprised me and continues to surprise me is that the president's team says he was not notified of this. That tells me when Lindsey Graham and Dick Blumenthal, denying Dick, are in Ukraine, and then Pompeo goes over to Odessa and brackets the attack afterwards, that tells me that the administrative state, the national security state, deep state, whatever you want to call it, I call it the national security state, has basically gone around the president of the United States. If that in fact is true, now he may have been notified, and for all the right reasons is staying mum about that. because that would inflame the situation even more and open up the continental United States to targeting from nuclear weapons potentially. But I doubt that he would be able to contain himself if he had been notified of this, because he'd be talking about it. So I'm just very, very concerned. I don't think he'll respond with nuclear weapons, but I think the response is going to be so big that it will, because it has to send that message. You don't mess with our nuclear stuff.
But it's us that will replace whatever is blown up. So you see the text here from President Trump saying it was a good conversation, but not a conversation that will lead to immediate peace. President Putin said very strongly he will respond to the recent attack on the airfields. So that's President Trump saying, you got to do what you got to do. And then we will go and replace that. Can we maybe not commit to not doing that? Like, you have to suffer the consequences, Ukraine. You poked the bear. We can't do this, but there's no talk of that. And that makes me absolutely batshit crazy.
Oh, it makes me crazy too. Look, the United States' interest is not along the border between Ukraine and Russia. Even Barack Obama said that that's not in our interest to be involved in combat operations or any type of operations there while they're at war with each other. We should be talking about how we're not going to further inflame this, and we're not. That tells me, and that heightens my concern that as the president lost control of the national security state and therefore the NATO national security state, which expands it even more, that everybody should be really concerned and pushing on your elected officials very aggressively that this has got to be put to an end, because quite frankly, the worst case situation isn't him responding strongly on Ukraine. The worst case situation is that they follow their nuclear doctrine but don't use nuclear warheads, and they attack a NATO or a United States target because they know we're behind it. That's the worst case situation.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go, well, that point you just made, and then I want to go back to something you said earlier about NATO. This idea that President Trump didn't know any of this, and maybe that's true. But yesterday we had reports on our show talking about that Pete Hegseth was watching this happening in real time, that these drone attacks on Russia happening in real time. And that might have been the case too. He didn't know about it, and he was called into the Situation Room. They were watching it live in real time. Who knows? But this morning, Jack Posobiec on the War Room with Steve Bannon did say that he has sources that said the intelligence community absolutely knew that this was coming, and they were basically a part of it. I mean, how can Ukraine hit all of these targets? I have a friend living in Siberia, just reached out to me today. He says one of these bombs went off right near him in Siberia. Like, they hit in deep, deep targets inside of Russia. This had to have been a NATO coordinated strike. And I just find it stunning to think that no one in the Trump administration was aware of this. And if not, that is maybe the most deeply troubling part of this entire story.
It is very deeply troubling. I mean, I get back to what I just said. One of the targets, at least one, may be us because of this. That would follow their doctrine, and my goodness. Now, Hegseth if he was in the Pentagon, in the National Military Command Center, we've got a team that monitors worldwide situations, and they could have called him. He's like 50 or 100 feet from the entrance to that, so they could have pulled him in, and he could have watched it in real time if we detected it and knew about it. But our intelligence had to know about it. There is no way that the Ukrainian SBU has the capability to look at all those targets, to get inside of the ground transportation system of the Russian Federation. Think about the strength of having or being able to do that and get 6,000 kilometers in and attack a nuclear bomber base. That would be like somebody being able to get a massive truck with hundreds of armed drones in it, all the way from one of our coasts or from the northern or southern border to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri where the B-2s are, and destroying half of those airplanes. And the B-2s and B-52s, there's less than 100 of them total. That's our total nuclear force, bomber force structure right there right now. And we would respond very forcefully to that, to send that message that I just said. Look, I used to work in this business not too long ago, and that's exactly what we would do. So it's obvious that we had to know about it from the intelligence perspective, and that's what I'm talking about. It appears that the deep state, intelligence state, whatever you want to call it, the national security state is my phrase, has gone rogue. If they did not inform the president of the United States and his command team, which would be Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, that this operation was coming up and it had already been approved by the last administration, et cetera, that is a much bigger issue for us than it is anything else in this discussion. And I'm surprised I'm not seeing the president come out about it is my concern. I don't know what's happening from that perspective, because usually, after a couple of days of something like this from a national security perspective, he will, if he's got an issue, he lets people know. And we're not hearing anything. Right. It's completely silent.
Great point.
Now, something that the president had hinted to in the campaign was possibly leaving NATO or making NATO states pay for themselves. We see now the war continues. American taxpayers continue to foot the bill. Now, the Pentagon says that Pete Hegseth is heading to Europe to encourage each member state of NATO to pay at least 5% their GDP and pay their fair share. But right now, Americans pay almost 65% of NATO. So Europeans have this sort of arrogance about they want the war to continue, but they are dependent on America keeping it going. And so how can Pete Hegseth get them to change anything? And why would they? It's kind of like if your college student lives in your basement and you say you need to pay the water bill, you're not going to do anything if they don't. Why would they start to, right? Because you're not going to go without water. You're not going to, there's no point. So he can say, please, but we're going to keep paying for that.
Yeah, we have to withdraw the funding. That's the force and the power behind the president's public position that he ran on. One of the reasons I supported him so aggressively and voted for him and encouraged others to, and spent millions of dollars to help get him reelected, was because of that issue. Because not necessarily to deconstruct NATO, although I have said before in the recent past that they've outlived their time. But to make the Europeans take the lead, not just in command, but primarily from a funding perspective, because it's not the right thing to do to make the American people fund, especially a war that most of us don't agree with. And I don't care what fake poll people show, most Americans, 65%, do not agree with further involvement in the aggressive nature of our involvement in this war with Russia because of this nuclear issue. A lot of people understand it. So we've got to get down to that. And the real deal is, will they pull the money? Initially, they said they were going to pull it, and then it got started again. And I got a bad feeling that the national security state has decided they're going to keep the president's team as much in the dark as absolutely humanly possible. They can't do it in everything. But in this, they're trying to keep it going for some reason. Congress is involved. I think that they need to be investigated, especially Graham and Blumenthal and everybody else that's tied to this effort over there through the funding, because enough is enough. I don't want my children and grandchildren to have to go fight and die for the border between Ukraine and Russia, especially when we're on the side that looks like it's the one that's infuriating the situation and continuing to keep it going, where tens of thousands of their people are dying, and Russians are dying too, but tens of thousands of Ukrainians are dying. They're eliminating their population, and they can't keep it up for much longer. The Europeans, they still buy LNG, liquefied natural gas, from the Russians. Millions of dollars. They spend more on energy from Russia today, Germany does, than they do supporting the war effort that they supposedly like. That just tells me that the whole picture of the threat of Russia is, as I've been telling people, it's overblown, it's propagandized because there's a war now, and it's continuing to feed what some people call the military-industrial complex here in the United States and now in our NATO allied countries overseas, but they're still not willing to put up 5% of their GDP, and every country over there ought to be doing that regardless. And look, the main thing may be, the main power struggle may be to pull out or threaten to pull out of NATO or pull out of it altogether if they don't come around, because we've got other threats that we really have to take a look at, especially the Chinese Communist Party. Look, this drone thing, the Chinese have around 19 military bases. They have farmland. They've had tens of thousands of Chinese military-age males come into this country during the Biden administration that are untracked and those kinds of things. There is a big issue out there from the Chinese Communist Party perspective, directly targeted at the United States of America, and we're not handling it.
Colonel, yeah, everyone in our chat room agrees with you. Get out of NATO. Others calling it NATO a terrorist organization. We've obviously covered that here on the show, Operation Gladio, and it should have ended with the fall of the Soviet Union. Why does it still exist? So we could go on and on about this, and we'll be watching it closely. Colonel Rob Maness, always great to see you, host of the Rob Maness Show. Thank you so much for taking time out to talk with us today. We're going to be watching this, and your words, Putin's going to launch a massive, massive retaliation. Rob, great to see you, Colonel.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you, Natalie.
So that's the news update. Now I want to tell you about today's sponsor for this news update, and it has to do with this insane, really sort of monumental bull market that's happening right now in the world, in my opinion. These numbers speak for themselves. And I'm about to share with you, for the first time, my number one pure silver play for the coming decade, because we're watching right now as the U.S. dollar is in a downward debt spiral right now. Real trouble for the U.S. dollar. I mean, look, the Trump administration can put as fine a spin on it as they want right now, but I'm telling you, the cracks are there. The cracks are getting wider by the second. So let's get right into it. Right now, silver is near $34 an ounce. That's a 12-year high. Wall Street's Bank of America is forecasting $4,000 an ounce. The GDX is up 43% so far this year in 2025, and the GDXJ, which looks at all of those junior mining stocks, is up 45% in 2025, mining precious minerals. So for the first time in history, gold's price has actually hit $3,400 an ounce. And this is a monumental milestone, by the way. Both Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are forecasting $4,000 an ounce of gold by mid-2026. JP Morgan analysts even see gold hitting $6,000 an ounce by 2029 under certain scenarios. Silver has surged by more than 160%. And this is the primary reason that I personally cannot think of a better time to highlight today's sponsor, Argenta Silver. Here's their ticker on your screen right now. Pay attention to the details of their business model, and I want you guys to do all your own homework, okay, as always. Here are the top 3 reasons that this is currently my top silver idea for 2025. Number 1, 2 highly successful businessmen with proven track records in mining are buying millions and tens of millions of shares of the company. Both Frank Giustra, whose open market purchases in 2025 are displayed right here on your screen, and the Argentinian real estate entrepreneur Eduardo Elstein, who has acquired 25 million shares in March, are major shareholders of Argenta Silver. And number 2, the valuation of the company. Here are just some dry figures for you, which I think tell the story. The previous owners of the El Cuevar spent an estimated $60 million Canadian on the project, discovering the 3rd largest pure silver deposit in Argentina, and then they built a 100-person camp. Argenta then purchased this project for only $3.5 million in September. And then number 3, less than 1% of this project area has been explored. Think about that. Less than 1%. I cannot overstate the potential here for this project. This is already the 3rd largest undeveloped pure silver deposit in Argentina. And with the mining sector surging in 2025, the massive demand for silver is up 13%. Gold is up 26%. The GDXJ is up 45%. While the NASDAQ is basically flat, Argenta Silver is commencing on a drilling program. Again, the ticker here is on your screen on the OTC. It's AGAGF. This is one of the reasons. With gold hitting an all-time high, with silver hitting a 12-year high, and with one of Argentina's most prominent businessmen with a track record in mining investing $5 million in Argenta Silver, and then you've got a billionaire mining magnate, Frank Giustra, calling this project a vehicle to fulfill a 40-year dream of his to scale a pure silver play company. That's why I'm featuring it today. I mean, Frank is a genius. I featured him before. Hopefully you guys remember. He is a legend in this business. So I personally, like when legends make moves, I pay attention to what those legends are doing. Frank Giustra owns 13.5% of Argenta. Eduardo Elstein, a real estate entrepreneur from Argentina, owns just over 12% of the company himself. So again, on the screen, you can see how Mr. Giustra is buying more shares right now in 2025. Like I said, this really matters to me on a personal level that both Eduardo Elstein and Frank Giustra have been buying millions of shares of this company, of Argenta Silver, this year in 2025. So guys, do your own homework on Argenta Silver. I always say do your own homework because it's your responsibility after all. I'll have links to their website in the description below so you can dive into their data, look at their numbers, study everything yourself, and we'll see you next time, everyone.